My name is Nora Alvarez, and I am 70 years old. For most of my life, I worked as a home health aide, the kind of woman who helps others' parents grow old with dignity while postponing her own rest. After decades of scrubbing floors and folding laundry in houses that were never mine, I finally bought a small place of my own on Willow Creek Drive in Austin. 2 bedrooms, a lemon tree, and a porch swing I'd painted sky blue. For years, that house was my world, quiet, clean, predictable. Until the morning my son Caleb decided it wasn't mine anymore. It was 8:02 a.m. on a Tuesday. I had just poured my second cup of coffee when the door swung open without a knock. Caleb's footsteps echoed across the wooden floor. He used to knock when he was little. He doesn't anymore. "Mom," he said flatly, standing in the doorway with his truck keys still in hand. "Melissa, the kids, and her mother are moving in. Their apartment's too small. We've decided." My hand froze in midair. Coffee spilled over the rim, dripping slowly across the counter and down the cupboard. The dark stain spread like a wound on the tile. I didn't answer. I just looked at him. He was still in his work uniform from the auto shop grease on his sleeves, that same determined jaw his father once had. He didn't look nervous or apologetic. He looked like a man delivering a decision already made. He kept talking, calm and certain. "It's just temporary, Mom. You've got 2 bedrooms and live alone. We'll help with groceries. It makes sense. It makes sense." He said it the same way customers used to tell me, "You don't mind staying late, do you?" as if politeness could erase entitlement. Inside, I felt something sharp and cold settle in my chest. For years, I had accepted things in silence, extra shifts, unreturned favors, broken promises. But this was my home. Still, my lips barely moved when I said I heard you. He mistook it for approval. He walked farther in, scanning the house like he was planning renovations. "The kids can take the spare room. My mother-in-law, Denise, can stay in the den. Melissa and I will sleep on the couch until we figure something out." Each sentence landed like a nail being driven in. "Can stay. We'll sleep. We've decided." Not once did he say, "Would you like that, Mom?" He smiled faintly. "You won't be alone anymore. This will be good for you. Good for me." The words echoed sweet on the surface, sour underneath. I'd heard that tone before from families who told me their elderly mother needed company while they left for vacations. That same mix of pity and control. I set the coffee pot down. Steam hissed as the liquid burned on the metal plate. "When are you bringing them?" I asked quietly. He didn't notice the steel beneath my voice. "Saturday morning. Melissa's packing. The kids are thrilled they'll finally have a backyard. And Denise's knees are bad. She can't live alone." I nodded slowly, hiding the storm rising behind my calm. He thought he'd solved a problem. He didn't see that he had created one. 4 days, I thought. 4 days to breathe, to think, to remember who I am. He reached out, patted my shoulder like he was doing me a favor. "Don't worry, Mom. We've got it all handled." Handled. That word. The same one doctors used when they didn't want to explain. The same one men used when they didn't want to be questioned. He walked out already on the phone, probably with Melissa talking about boxes and moving trucks. The door shut behind him, but his cologne lingered sharp and artificial. The silence that followed wasn't peace anymore. It was possession. I looked down at the coffee spreading on the tile and understood something I had never allowed myself to admit. I had spent a lifetime cleaning up other people's messes. Now someone had come to turn my home into one. I wiped the spill slowly, each motion deliberate, like reclaiming the ground under my feet. The smell of coffee and bleach mixed in the air, bitter and cleansing. When the floor was clean again, I poured myself another cup and sat at the kitchen table. The family photo hung above the fridge, Christmas 3 years ago. Caleb with his new watch, Melissa smiling too wide, their kids Eli and Sophie tugging at ribbons, and me standing off to the side barely visible. That was the story of my life. The background woman, the helper, the afterthought. The clock ticked to 8:47 a.m. I took out the old notebook where I used to keep grocery lists and utility bills. On a blank page in blue pen, I wrote 3 words. My turn now. Outside, the wind moved through the lemon tree, shaking loose 2 ripe fruits that rolled onto the grass. The sunlight caught them bright as gold, my gold, earned peace fragile and real. I lifted my cup again. The coffee was bitter, strong, grounding, and I smiled, small but certain. Caleb thought he had made the final decision that morning. He didn't realize his declaration had just awakened something in me, quiet, deliberate, and unstoppable. Morning sunlight spilled across the kitchen floor, tracing every crack on the old tiles. I sat there still in my robe, hands wrapped around the same chipped coffee cup I'd owned for 30 years. The small fracture on the handle had been there forever. I could have thrown it away a dozen times, but I never did. That cup had survived moves, storms, and lonely breakfasts. So had I. As I stared at the crack glinting under the light, I realized how much of my life had been like that, patched, repaired, still holding together, even after being dropped too many times. The house was quiet, but my mind wasn't. Caleb's words from the day before still rang in my ears. At your age, you shouldn't live alone. It was meant to sound caring. But I knew that tone. It was the same one people used when they wanted to make your life smaller, when they mistook protection for control. I didn't argue. I just looked at him. He thought my silence was surrender. He was wrong. 43 years ago, I was standing in a stranger's kitchen, wearing an apron that wasn't mine, wiping crumbs off a marble counter I could never afford. I had just started my first job as a live-in housekeeper for the Bennett family. They paid me $85 a week plus meals. Every night after the kids went to bed, I'd sneak into the laundry room, open the tin can hidden behind the detergent, and slip in a few dollars. That was my dream fund, $1 at a time, for a home that would have my name on the deed. Back then, Caleb was 8. He used to wait up for me, pretending to do homework until I came home from the evening shift. I'd kiss his forehead, whisper, "One day you'll have your own room, baby," and he'd smile. Years later, I did give him that room. I paid for his college with the same tired hands that scrubbed other people's bathtubs. I skipped dental checkups to cover his textbooks. I took the night shift when he wanted to join the football team. Every dream I ever had, every plan was built around someone else's need. Now, decades later, that same boy sat in my living room, legs crossed, telling me how my house was too big for me. He didn't even look up when he said it. "Mom, you shouldn't live alone at your age. It's not safe. What if you fall? What if no one finds you?" I wanted to laugh. For 40 years, no one ever had trouble finding me when they needed something. They found me when they needed rent money or babysitting or someone to call when the car broke down. But when I needed company, silence. Still, I said nothing. My silence was my shield. My quiet was not weakness anymore. It was the sound of gears turning. He mistook my calm for confusion. He even smiled that soft, condescending smile that men reserve for women they think they've outgrown. I lifted the chipped cup and took a slow sip, the coffee bitter against my tongue. "You worry too much, Caleb," I said finally. "I just want to make sure you're taken care of." "I've been taking care of myself for 70 years, I replied. He shrugged, glancing around my house as if already rearranging it in his mind. The lemon tree outside swayed gently, the same one I planted the day I signed the mortgage. I remember digging that soil with my bare hands, feeling the rough bark, the smell of earth under my nails. That house was not just walls. It was 40 years of missed birthdays, sleepless nights, and silent prayers. It was the price I paid for a small patch of peace, and now my son was claiming it as convenient real estate. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with the notebook open in front of me. Numbers filled the page. Old savings, property tax records, pension deposits. My mind worked the way it used to when I managed 5 households at once, efficient, methodical, precise. "You shouldn't live alone." He said it like a warning. But what he didn't know was that I had already started thinking about boundaries, thinking about respect, thinking about how much my silence had cost me over the years. I remembered one particular winter when I worked for the Morgans, a wealthy family downtown. Their youngest son had pneumonia, and I stayed up 3 nights straight beside his bed, holding a cool cloth to his forehead. When Mrs. Morgan finally came home from her trip, she said, "You're a godsend, Nora. I don't know what we'd do without you." And then she handed me a $20 bonus and went upstairs to sleep. That's what my care was worth, a small tip and polite gratitude. And still, I stayed another 10 years. Because that's what women like me did. We stayed. We endured. We told ourselves it was noble. But noble doesn't pay the mortgage. Sacrifice doesn't guarantee respect. The house on Willow Creek was supposed to change that. It was supposed to be mine. Yet somehow, even here, they were trying to move in. By midnight, the house was still. I ran my fingers along the crack in the coffee cup again, tracing its uneven edge. It reminded me that things can break and still hold. That strength isn't about being flawless, it's about staying whole even after being dropped. I rinsed the cup, placed it carefully on the rack, and turned off the light. Tomorrow, I'd start with a new plan, because I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a woman who had paid for every inch of this life, and I was done letting anyone decide how I lived it. The next morning, the sky was still gray when I tied my scarf and stepped outside. The air had that crisp smell of rain that never came. I walked slowly down Willow Creek, hands deep in my coat pockets, my mind still echoing the same sentence from the night before. At your age, you shouldn't live alone. But I wasn't walking to prove I could. I was walking because I needed to think away from walls that now carried his voice. Halfway to the park, I stopped by the cafe where my walking group always met before our morning laps. The bell above the door chimed softly. The smell of roasted beans and cinnamon greeted me like an old friend. And there she was, Sharon Hines, 68, sitting by the window, her red cardigan draped neatly over the chair. A widow like me. And like me, she had once been told what to do with her own house. 2 years ago, Sharon's son had convinced her to sell her cottage, promising she'd be safer living near him. She had sold it, moved into a small apartment, and cried every night for 6 months. Now she rented a place on her own again, and every step she took back toward independence made her taller. When she saw me, she smiled that quiet smile of understanding women share without words. "You didn't walk this morning," she said, stirring her tea. "No," I replied, sitting down across from her. Something came up. I paused, watching the steam rise from my cup. They decided for me, Sharon. This time, I'll decide for them. Her spoon stopped mid-stir. Then that slow, knowing smile returned. "Then we plan," she said softly, quietly. We didn't need more words than that. Women like us had learned to communicate in glances and pauses, the language of survival. I reached into my purse, pulled out the old envelope I'd been carrying since yesterday. Inside were copies of the house deed, my bank statements, and a savings account ledger Caleb didn't know existed. I slid it across the table. "Everything I ever worked for is right here," I said, "and they think it's theirs to arrange." Sharon looked at the papers, then back at me. "You're smarter than they remember, Nora." "They never noticed," I said, "because I made it easy for them not to." Outside, the first buses were starting to pass, engines humming. The cafe filled with the scent of burnt toast and early chatter. But for us, the world had narrowed down to one quiet plan: how to take back what was mine before they even realized they'd lost it. That afternoon, I cleared the sewing table in the small room at the back of my house. The space had always been my sanctuary. Threads organized by color scissors sharpened a jar of buttons arranged by size. But now it became something else, a strategy board. I pinned an empty calendar to the wall marked the coming Saturday in red. On the shelf, I stacked folders labeled mortgage, savings, insurance, and utilities. Each represented a piece of my autonomy proof that I wasn't the fragile woman they imagined. Then from the bottom drawer, I pulled out a small velvet pouch. Inside was a rusted key, its edges smooth from years of use. The key to my old safe box tucked away at a local credit union, opened once every few years, only when I needed to touch the life I had built quietly, dollar by dollar. I held it in my palm. The metal felt cold but alive. It reminded me of the first day I opened that safe placing inside the envelope with my savings, my will, and one small photograph of Caleb at age 10. That key wasn't just a piece of metal, it was the anchor to my freedom, the line connecting who I was and who I was becoming again. I pinned a note on the board, Saturday, move day. Under it, I wrote Step 1, secure. Step 2, decide. Step 3, act. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt since I was a young woman planning her escape from poverty purpose. That night, Sharon called me. "Did you start?" she asked. "I did," I said. "I cleaned the sewing table. It's a war room now." She chuckled. "War rooms start with thread and coffee, Nora. That's how women like us fight." I smiled into the dark. "They won't see it coming, Sharon." "Good," she said. "That's how it should be." When I hung up, the house felt different. Not haunted anymore, but alert, like it was listening, waiting. I locked the front door, then went back to the sewing room. The key was still in my palm. I placed it on the table beside my old notebook and whispered to myself, "They think I'm preparing for company, but I'm preparing for freedom." I turned off the light. The metal key caught the faint glow from the hallway lamp, a small, defiant spark in the dark. And in that moment, I knew whatever was coming on Saturday, I would be ready. Because for the first time in 70 years, the plan wasn't theirs. It was mine. Friday came wrapped in quiet sunlight. The lemon tree outside glittered after a light rain, and for the first time all week, the house smelled like coffee instead of worry. I had just finished pinning another list on my strategy board when the sound of tires crunching gravel broke the stillness. I looked through the window. A silver SUV parked by the fence. Martha stepped out, balancing a white pastry box in her hands, and that polished smile she wore for every occasion that required pretending. She didn't knock. She never did. The smell of cheap glaze filled the hallway before she even spoke. "Hi, Mom," she sang out, walking straight into the kitchen. "I brought donuts, your favorite maple. $5 a dozen at the new place by Main Street." $5. She said it like it was generosity. I watched her set the box on my table right over the folder labeled mortgage. The irony wasn't lost on me. Ethan's at the apartment finishing the packing. She continued pulling out a chair. "We're almost done. Everything's ready." She sat down, crossed her legs, and started talking like this was a team meeting. "So Mom Olivia will take the guest room, of course. The kids can stay in your sewing room. There's enough space if we move your machine. We'll bring their bunk bed over Saturday morning." I didn't answer. I kept my eyes on the steam rising from my cup. Then slowly I asked, "And where will I stay, Vartha?" Her smile flickered just a fraction of a second, but it was enough. "Oh, you'll still have your bedroom, obviously," she stammered. "I mean, we'll all make do until things settle." Silence. Even the ticking clock seemed hesitant to fill it. She reached for the donut box, opening it like an offering. "It's just temporary, Nora. We'll figure it out together." I looked at her hands, manicured, trembling slightly, and realized this visit wasn't about kindness. It was damage control. Ethan had told her I agreed. I leaned back in my chair. "Tell me, Martha," I said quietly. "Did you ever ask me if I wanted this?" Her head lifted too fast. Her lips parted, but no words came. That half second of confusion told me everything. She hadn't. And worse, she thought she didn't need to. Her eyes darted toward the front door as if she could already hear Ethan's voice in her head. "Just be nice. Mom will come around." I watched her composure crumble layer by layer. Then, as if clinging to her last line of defense, she forced a laugh. "Ethan said you were fine with it, that you understood. Maybe he didn't explain it right." There it was, the lie exposed without me raising my voice. I folded my hands on the table. My fingers were steady. My pulse was not. "He explained it just fine," I said. "I just hadn't answered yet." She blinked, unsure what to do with the silence that followed. I let it linger, heavy, deliberate, until she shifted in her seat. "Well," she said, finally standing up, "I should get back. The truck's coming early Saturday." "Yes," I said, rising slowly. "Bring them Saturday." The words hung in the air between us, calm and final. She exhaled in relief, mistaking my tone for acceptance. "Thank you, Mom. I knew you'd come around." She picked up her purse box of donuts, forgotten. I followed her to the door, opened it, and watched her walk toward the SUV. Her heels clicked against the driveway like a countdown. When the engine started, I whispered under my breath, "Saturday it is." She waved before driving off, smiling that same bright, hollow smile, the smile of a woman who believed she had won. When the car disappeared down the road, I closed the door and leaned against it. The quiet came rushing back, thick as fog. I walked into the sewing room, the one she had just claimed for her children, and traced my fingers along the wooden frame of the machine. It wasn't just a room. It was my space, the one place that had always belonged entirely to me. On the table, the old safe key gleamed under the weak afternoon light. I picked it up, feeling its weight again colder this time. "Bring them Saturday," I repeated softly. Martha thought it was permission, but what I was really giving her was a trap. The kind that doesn't need shouting or revenge. The kind that works with quiet precision like a needle through fabric, one stitch at a time, until the whole pattern reveals itself. Outside, the lemon tree shivered in the wind. Inside, my resolve hardened like steel cooling after fire. Saturday would come soon enough, and when it did, they would learn one simple truth, that even after 70 years of silence, a woman who owns her home can still own her destiny. Thursday night came heavy with silence, the kind of silence that builds before a storm. The clock read 9:12 p.m. The lamp by the sofa cast a circle of light across the rug. I sat there watching the evening news, one hand cupping a mug of coffee, steam rising in slow spirals. Then the door slammed open. Ethan stormed in breath-sharp eyes, hard. He didn't knock. He never did anymore. "Mom, what the hell was that with Martha?" he barked. "She said you sounded off. You told her to bring everyone Saturday, but what's going on here?" I muted the television. The room fell quiet except for the ticking clock. He was still wearing his mechanic's jacket grease on his sleeves, the smell of engine oil cutting through the warmth of coffee. "You talked to Martha," I said, keeping my voice even. "Of course I did. She's packing everything. And then you go confusing her with what attitude?" His words hit like thrown tools, loud, careless, without aim. I looked back at the TV screen, unmuted it. A reporter was talking about a city zoning dispute. The sound filled the air, dull but steady. I sipped my coffee. He took a step closer. "Mom, are you serious? You can't say no to this." I turned to him finally, met his eyes. My voice was calm, sharp as the edge of porcelain. "I just did. 3 words. That's all it took." The sound of the clock filled the space between us, tick, 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 like a metronome marking the end of something invisible. He froze for half a beat, then laughed low and disbelieving. "You're being ridiculous. We're trying to help you. By taking my rooms, my quiet, my peace," I said. "Is that what you call help?" He exhaled hard, pacing. His shoes left dark marks on the tile. "You don't understand. It's temporary. You can't live alone forever, and you can't live in my house," I said. The TV hummed in the background, a commercial jingle played almost cheerful. The absurdity of it hung in the air, the ordinary world marching on, while ours cracked open in slow motion. He slammed his hand against the table. "I'm your son." "Exactly," I said softly. "Not my landlord." The tension snapped like a wire pulled too tight. He stared at me, speechless. For the first time in years, I saw something shift in his face, not anger, not guilt, but recognition. The look a man gives when he realizes the person he's talking to is not the same as the one he thought he could control. He tried again, weaker this time. "Mom, please, don't do this. Do what Ethan, make this harder. Harder for who I asked." He had no answer. The clock ticked. The coffee steamed. The TV droned on about housing permits and community hearings. Life outside went on indifferent. Finally, he muttered something under his breath, half anger, half surrender, and turned for the door. "Fine. But this isn't over." I didn't look away from the TV. "No," I said quietly. "It's just begun." The door slammed again. This time, I didn't flinch. When the sound faded, I turned the volume back up. The anchor on the news was talking about property rights and eviction laws. I almost laughed. I lifted my cup, felt the heat against my palms. The liquid trembled slightly, but my hand didn't. He thought this was a fight about space. It wasn't. It was about dignity, and the price of forgetting who built the foundation he now walked on. The clock struck 10. Outside, rain began to tap softly against the window pane. I sat there, calm, steady, waiting, because the first battle was over, and I had won. Saturday morning arrived with a hollow stillness, the kind that sits on your chest before something breaks. From the kitchen window, I saw the moving truck pull into the driveway at exactly 9:00 a.m. The brakes hissed. The back door rattled open. Ethan jumped down, first clipboard in hand, giving orders. Martha followed, sunglasses on, pretending confidence. The children spilled out of the SUV, laughing, running circles through my garden. And in the passenger seat of the silver car, Olivia, Martha's mother, sat quietly fanning herself, her gaze heavy with ownership that wasn't hers. The world moved in slow motion. Cardboard boxes, shouts, the thud of boots against my walkway. I opened the front door before any of them reached the steps. "Stop there," I said. Ethan turned, surprised. "Mom, what are you doing? We're bringing the boxes in." I stepped forward, steady, my hand resting lightly on the doorframe. My voice was calm, clear, final. "You're not bringing anything in." Silence. Even the children stopped laughing. A breeze carried the smell of damp earth and coffee grounds. Ethan blinked as if I had spoken in another language. "What you heard me," I said. "Nothing crosses this threshold without my permission." Martha's hands trembled around the box she was holding. One jelly donut slid from the top and hit the driveway with a soft thud. She froze, color draining from her face. Across the street, Mrs. Hammond, my neighbor, peeked from behind her curtains. Another window opened. The neighborhood was watching. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Mom, don't make a scene." "I'm not," I said. "You are." He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "We've already decided." I smiled, and I've already answered. The air shifted. For a heartbeat, everything stilled. The wind, the voices, the movement. Then from behind me, a familiar sound, the tap of shoes against the porch. Sharon. She stood beside me, her posture upright, her eyes bright. Her presence said everything solidarity-proof witness. "Morning, Nora," she said lightly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Quite the busy driveway today." I nodded. "They seem to think they live here." Ethan turned red. "Mom, don't do this in front of people." "People should see," I said. "It helps them remember the truth." I looked around, meeting the eyes behind the curtains, the glances over fences. Then I spoke not to Ethan, not to Martha, but to the air itself. "This is my house. You decide for your life, not for mine." The words cut through the morning like glass through quiet. Martha's lips parted in shock. Ethan clenched his fists. Even Olivia shifted in her seat inside the car, her hand frozen mid-fan. For a moment, no one moved. Then Ethan barked, "You can't keep us out. We'll sue if we have to." I met his glare without flinching. "Then bring your lawyer," I said. "I'll bring my documents." It was the sound of balance restoring itself. He stared at me, speechless. The boxes stayed where they were, half on the driveway, half forgotten. The movers looked at each other, waiting for instructions that never came. Sharon folded her arms. "Seems clear enough," she said, her tone dry as summer dust. Ethan turned away, muttering something under his breath. Martha touched his arm, whispering, "Let's go." The kids stood near the truck, confused, holding toys that suddenly looked out of place. The slow motion of departure began, doors slamming, engines, starting a car pulling out of the driveway that wasn't theirs to enter. When the dust settled, the only sound left was the creak of the porch steps and the clock ticking faintly inside. Sharon looked at me, half smiling. "That was your first public victory." I nodded. "And the most important one." She tilted her head. "You plan this every second." We stood side by side, watching the road clear the sunlight, reclaiming the driveway they had tried to occupy. "They'll be back," Sharon warned. "I know," I said. "That's why I'm ready." She squeezed my arm gently. "You just taught them what boundaries look like." I looked at the lemon tree. A single yellow fruit had fallen onto the grass during the commotion. I walked over, picked it up, wiped the dust away. The rind was cool, fragrant, alive. Like me. That evening, the street was quiet again. No boxes, no shouting, just the low hum of crickets and the faint sound of the clock striking 7. I sat on the porch, the safe key resting in my palm cold against my skin. The first battle had been private, this one public. And as the sky deepened into dusk, I whispered to myself, "Let them bring noise. I have proof." Because power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it stands barefoot on a porch, holding a lemon and a key, and knows the war is turning its way. The phone started ringing before sunrise. It didn't stop. By noon, I had counted 6 calls, each one angrier than the last. Family doesn't call to listen. They call to correct. On the 7th ring, I picked up. "Nora," the voice snapped. "What on earth are you doing, Tina?" "My sister, 3 years younger, twice as loud." She had heard the story already from Ethan, no doubt. "You threw your own son out in front of the neighbors." Her words cracked through the receiver like a whip. "I told them not to bring their things in," I said calmly. "You embarrassed him." "He embarrassed himself." There was a sharp inhale on the other end. "Sons can always count on their mothers," she said. "Not," I answered, "when they turn their mothers into property." Silence, the kind that cuts deeper than shouting. I could almost hear her blinking, recalibrating, trying to find footing in a world where the rules she grew up with no longer held. "It's just, people will talk, Nora. They'll say you've lost your mind." "Then let them talk," I said. "I've been quiet long enough for everyone else to speak over me. It's my turn." She sighed long and theatrical. "He's your son, and I'm his mother," I replied. "Not his doormat?" The line went quiet again. A low hum filled the background, her TV maybe, or her conscience. Finally, she said, "You'll regret this when you're lonely." I looked around my kitchen. Sunlight spilled across the counter, warming the empty coffee cup beside the lemon I had picked that morning. "Tina," I said softly, "I've been lonely for years. I just stopped pretending otherwise." Then I hung up. The silence afterward felt strange at first, heavy but clean. The phone sat on the table, still glowing faintly as if waiting for the next accusation to arrive. It didn't. I turned it face down. Then I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee. The smell filled the room, dark, steady, grounding. I carried it to the porch and sat where I could see the road. The same road where 2 days ago they had arrived with boxes and certainty. Now it was empty. Still. Each sip tasted like reclaiming something space-air self. The world expects mothers to bend, to give, forgive, absorb, to make peace even when peace costs them their dignity. But peace built on silence isn't peace, it's surrender. I wasn't surrendering anymore. The afternoon drifted by quietly. A bird landed on the lemon tree, pecking at one of the lower fruits. Somewhere down the street, a lawnmower buzzed life, carrying on indifferent to moral debates. Inside the answering machine blinked red 11 missed calls. Neighbors, relatives, voices trying to pull me back into their version of right and wrong. I let it blink. Instead, I reached for the safe key on the table and set it beside my coffee cup. The metal glimmered faintly in the sunlight. To anyone else, it was just a key. To me, it was a line drawn in steel between who I used to be and who I refused to become again. As evening settled, I poured the last of the coffee down the sink, washed the cup, and turned the phone off completely. The click of the power button echoed in the empty kitchen. That small sound click wasn't rejection. It was reclamation. The house exhaled with me. For the first time in years, the silence wasn't punishment. It was mine. Sunday arrived with a strange kind of quiet. the quiet that comes before someone tries to fix what they broke. At 10 sharp, I heard a car pull into the driveway. Not Ethan's battered sedan, a dark blue Buick, polished, intentional. Through the window, I saw Ethan step out. First shoulders, tight face, set like stone. Behind him came John Chavez, his godfather, the man who had baptized him, coached him through baseball, and lectured me at every family gathering about how men handle things. He carried that same air of calm authority, now the kind that expected obedience before words were even spoken. I opened the door before they knocked. "Morning," I said. Mrs. Nora John greeted me, forcing a smile. "Mind if we come in?" I stepped aside. The living room still smelled of coffee and lemon polish. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. They sat on the sofa. Ethan stayed silent, letting his godfather do the talking. Nora John began, voice smooth as sermon oil. "I understand things got heated. Families argue. But this has gone far enough. The boy is desperate. He's made mistakes, yes, but surely you can't let children and an elderly woman sleep without a roof tonight." I said nothing. He leaned forward. "Don't be resentful. Think of the children." The words landed heavy, practiced, a sentence he'd probably used on women his whole life. I stood slowly, letting the silence stretch until even the clock seemed to wait. Then I said, "I raised children by cleaning strangers' floors, Mr. Chavez, and now those children want to clean out my life." Ethan's eyes flickered. John shifted, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to back down. "You're angry, and I understand that he tried again. But anger blinds good mothers. Compassion is what keeps families together. Compassion," I said, "doesn't mean erasing myself so others can stay comfortable." His jaw tightened. "So you'd rather live alone than help your son? I'd rather live with dignity than serve in my own house," I replied. That stopped him. He wasn't used to women using that word serve for anything but virtue. He looked at Ethan as if asking for backup. Ethan finally spoke, his voice sharp, desperate. "Mom, you'll need me when you're old." The words hung in the air like a curse disguised as prophecy. I met his stare steady. "Then I'll hire someone who respects me." The sentence dropped like a stone in still water. No one moved. For a moment, all three of us could hear it. The soft tick of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the sound of something breaking quietly inside their pride. Ethan's face flushed red. John exhaled, defeated. He tried once more, softer this time. "You don't mean that." "I do," I said, "because respect isn't negotiable." I walked to the table, picked up my coffee cup, and turned it slowly in my hand. The faint crack along its side caught the light, a new fracture thinner than before. Steam rose through the line like breath, escaping from something that had survived the heat. I set the cup down gently. "See this, Mr. Chavez, I've used this cup for 15 years. It's cracked, but it still holds coffee. What I won't hold anymore is disrespect." Ethan stood up, fists clenched. "You've changed." "No," I said. "You just never looked closely enough." John rose beside him, voice low, almost pleading now. "Think about what you're doing. Families fall apart over pride. Families fall apart," I said, "when one side forgets the other is human." That ended it. They left without another word, their footsteps heavy against the tile. When the door closed, I reached for the cup again. The crack had deepened, running a clean line from rim to handle. It didn't bother me. Some breaks don't mean ruin. They mean strength, finally showing itself. I took a sip. Still warm, still mine. Monday morning smelled of rain and endings. The clouds hung low, thick, quiet, like the pause before a secret is told. I dressed carefully. Navy cardigan, pressed slacks. The silver brooch Ernest gave me 40 years ago when he said, "You'll own something beautiful one day." Today I intended to prove him right. Sharon picked me up at 8 sharp, her white sedan idling at the curb. She rolled down the window and grinned. "You ready for the revolution, Nora?" "More than ready," I said. We didn't speak much during the drive. The rain began halfway there, thin at first, then heavier sheets of water against the windshield, rhythmic like a metronome. Each drop matched my heartbeat, steady, determined, alive. The bank smelled of paper and disinfectant. A young teller led us to a private office where the manager, Ms. Patel, greeted me with a professional smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Nora. How can we assist you today? I'd like to make a transfer. A large one." Her eyebrows rose slightly, but she nodded. As Sharon sat beside me, I opened my worn leather folder. Inside passbooks, old account statements, a lifetime of small, careful savings. "Amount," Ms. Patel asked. Everything I said. "Move it to my name only and close the joint account my son knows about." The woman hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." As she typed, the printer hummed, spitting out confirmation slips. The sound felt like the cutting of invisible ropes, each page proof of freedom bought with decades of exhaustion. After the signatures, Sharon and I walked out into the drizzle. "You did it," she said. "Not yet," I replied. "One more stop." The real estate office sat on the corner of Pine and Third. Inside, the air smelled faintly of fresh paint and ambition. Mr. Raymond Fields, my agent, rose when he saw me. "Mrs. Nora, are you ready to sign completely?" We sat across a walnut desk scattered with documents, sale agreements, purchase contracts, closing statements. Remember, he said once this is signed, it's final. "That's the point," I answered. He handed me a pen. The tip glided over paper, leaving a trail of ink as decisive as a heartbeat. Page 1, authorization to sell my house on Maple Street. Page 2, purchase confirmation for a smaller house across town, 2 bedrooms, a small garden, quiet neighbors. Each stroke of the pen was a goodbye to captivity. Each click of the page was an echo of a door closing. When I finished, Mr. Fields smiled. "Congratulations. The transfer is official. You'll have the new keys tomorrow." He slid a small envelope across the desk. Inside, temporary keys, shiny and new, cold against my palm. "And the old property?" he asked. "Listed and nearly sold," I said. "Let them find strangers at the address they thought they owned." Sharon looked at me with quiet awe. "You just rewrote your story." "No," I said softly. "I just started telling it in my own voice." Parallel scene. In another part of town, Ethan slammed a drawer shut, papers scattered. "We're going to get a lawyer," he barked at Martha. "She can't sell that house without telling us." Martha looked uneasy. "But she can, Ethan. It's hers." He ignored her. The phone rang. His friend from college, now a paralegal. "Can we contest a sale if the owner's my mother?" A pause. Then, "Only if you can prove incompetence." Ethan's voice dropped. "Then that's what we'll prove." Back at the real estate office, I heard the faint sound of thunder. Not from the sky, from somewhere far closer across the line of blood. I smiled slightly. Let him try. That evening, the rain stopped. Sharon drove me home. The air was clean, sharp, new. We sat in the kitchen sipping tea while the world outside dripped dry. I reached for the small safe key that had stayed beside me through everything. Its edges were worn smooth, the metal dull from decades of use. I turned it in my hand, then let it fall onto the table. It landed with a muted clink. A second later, I placed the new key, the one from the envelope, right beside it. The 2 pieces of metal touched old against new, past beside future. That night, I didn't dream. I didn't need to. I had lived the dream already, one where quiet women don't explode, they evolve. In the stillness of my empty kitchen, I whispered, "They decided for me once. I've decided for them now." The clock ticked softly. The house, my soon-to-be former house, exhaled. Some wars end in noise. Mine ended in paperwork and peace. The morning light fell sharp through the curtains, clear, golden, final. I was finishing the last box when I heard the familiar sound of tires grinding against the driveway. A door slammed. Ethan's voice tore through the quiet. "Mom? What's going on? Why is there a truck here?" I turned calm, holding the envelope that contained my new address. "I'm moving Ethan." He stared at me, blinking fast, his words tumbling over disbelief. "Moving? Where you sold the house. You sold our home." I met his eyes steadily. I sold my home. The only thing you lost was the illusion it was yours. The air cracked open between us. For a moment, he just stood there, mouth open, then dropped to his knees on the front step. The sound he made wasn't grief, it was shock. Not for losing me, for losing something he had assumed would always be his. The illusion of inheritance, the entitlement of ownership without sacrifice. He pressed his hands to his face. I can't believe you'd do this to your own son. I can, I said, because I finally did something for myself. Behind him, Sharon's white sedan pulled into the curb. The back seat was full of boxes and folded linens, a new beginning disguised as luggage. I locked the front door one last time. The key turned easily. No hesitation, no trembling. I placed it in Ethan's open hand. Keep it, I said. It'll remind you that nothing belongs to you just because you expect it to. He didn't answer. His eyes stayed on the house like a boy staring at a toy he broke and can't repair. I walked down the steps toward Sharon's car. When I opened the door, I looked back one last time. I hope you learn to value the women in your life, I told him, before there's nothing left for them to give. Then I closed the door and Sharon drove. The drive to my new house was quiet. Trees arched over the road like a tunnel of green forgiveness. When we arrived, the air felt lighter, less history, more sky. 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen that smelled faintly of new paint, a garden out back with just enough sunlight for herbs and flowers. Peace didn't need to be big, it just needed to be mine. A week later, my grandchildren came to visit. Their laughter filled the rooms, bouncing off clean walls that held no ghosts. Leo, the older one, saw the sewing machine on my desk. "Grandma, can you teach us to sew?" I smiled. Of course. When you sew, you choose every stitch. Life's the same. Never let others stitch for you. They leaned close as I guided their small hands over the fabric needle up, needle down thread, sliding through like breath. Each stitch a decision. Each decision a reclamation. On the kitchen table sat my new coffee cup, white porcelain, smooth, whole, no cracks, no history of breaking just to hold things together. I poured myself a cup, the steam rising like soft applause. Outside, the garden shimmered under the morning sun. A robin landed on the fence, watching. I lifted the cup and took a slow sip, steady, calm, alive. The world was quiet again, but it wasn't the silence of loneliness anymore. It was the silence of freedom. It's never too late to choose yourself. At 70, I learned something I wish I'd known sooner. Peace doesn't come from silence, it comes from self-respect. If this story spoke to you, take a moment to honor your own boundaries too, because it's never too late to choose yourself. Then the voice warm, slightly gentle invitation. If you believe every woman deserves dignity and her own voice, please give this story a like it helps others find it too. Subscribe to the channel for more real stories of quiet strength and second chances. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from tonight? I'd love to know. You'll find the full message and discussion question in the pinned comment below. Thank you for sharing your time with us today.